All right, everybody. Good morning. Happy Friday. We've got a full house this morning as we jump into First Samuel, continuing to work our way through the entirety of the Old Testament, demystifying the Old Testament, walking through verse by verse, line by line, as we seek to help everyone be able to have the tools necessary to be able to navigate your way through what is essentially two-thirds, if not more, of the scriptures as a whole. Before we get into today's festivities, a couple of things up on the top. Wherever you are tuning in from, the way these things go is we go through, we read a chapter, we stop, we hit the high points, we hit the things that stick out to us, and we go on like that. Inevitably, we're going to go past something that may stick out to you, or you may have a question, or something along those lines. That's where the comment section comes in. First off, let us know where you're tuning in from, because we'd like to know where y'all are hanging out at and all that kind of jazz. But also, any questions that you have along the way, it helps us to know where to hit the gas, where to pump the brakes, all of those kinds of things. And remember, as you are watching, that if you have the question, that likely means that somebody else has the question too. So do yourself the favor, do everybody else the favor, go ahead and ask. We welcome all questions along the way. So, like I said, we are picking up with First Samuel. This one will take us a little longer than the last one, which was a record speed for us, exactly one episode, to go through the book of Ruth. But we are continuing on with the story of the Old Testament. So we are going to go ahead and jump in. As usual, I am reading out of the NLT, but go ahead and grab whatever translation suits you. And before I jump into it, good morning. Glad you are with us this morning. All right. So with that, let's go ahead and jump in. 1 Samuel chapter 1. There was a man named Elkanah who lived in Ramah in the region of Zuph, in the hill country of Ephraim. He was the son of Jeroham, son of Elihu, son of Tohu, son of Zuph of Ephraim. Elkanah had two wives, Hannah and Peninnah. Peninnah had children, but Hannah did not. Each year, Elkanah would travel to Shiloh to worship and sacrifice to the Lord of heaven's armies at the tabernacle. The priests of the Lord at that time were the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas. On the days Elkanah presented his sacrifice, he would give portions of the meat to Peninnah and each of her children. And though he loved Hannah, he would give her only one choice portion because the Lord had given her no children. So Peninnah would taunt Hannah and make fun of her because the Lord had kept her from having children. Year after year, it was the same. Peninnah would taunt Hannah as they went to the tabernacle. Each time, Hannah would be reduced to tears and would not even eat. "Why are you crying, Hannah?" Elkanah would ask. "Why aren't you eating? Why be downhearted just because you have no children? You have me. Isn't that better than 10 sons?" Once after a sacrificial meal at Shiloh, Hannah got up and went to pray. Eli the priest was sitting at his customary place beside the entrance of the tabernacle. Hannah was in deep anguish, crying bitterly as she prayed to the Lord. She made this vow: O Lord of heaven's armies, if you will look upon my sorrow and answer my prayer and give me a son, then I will give him back to you. He will be yours for his entire lifetime. And as a sign that he would be dedicated to the Lord, his hair will never be cut. As she was praying to the Lord, Eli watched her. Seeing her lips moving but hearing no sound, he thought she had been drinking. Must you come here drunk? He demanded. Throw away your wine. Oh, no, sir, she replied. I haven't been drinking wine or anything stronger, but I am very discouraged, and I was pouring out my heart to the Lord. Don't think I am a wicked woman, for I have been praying out of great anguish and sorrow. In that case, Eli said, go in peace. May the God of Israel grant the requests you have asked him. Oh, thank you, sir, she exclaimed. Then she went back and began to eat again, and she was no longer sad. The entire family got up early the next morning and went to worship the Lord once more. Then they returned home to Ramah. When Elkanah slept with Hannah, the Lord remembered her plea, and in due time she gave birth to a son. She named him Samuel, for she said, I asked the Lord for him. The next year, Elkanah and his family went on their annual trip to offer a sacrifice to the Lord and to keep his vow. But Hannah did not go. She told her husband, wait till the boy is weaned. Then I will take him to the tabernacle and leave him there with the Lord permanently. Whatever you think is best, Elkanah agreed. Stay here for now, and may the Lord help you keep your promise. So she stayed home and nursed the boy until he was weaned. When the child was weaned, Hannah took him to the tabernacle in Shiloh. They brought along a 3-year-old bull for the sacrifice and a basket of flour and some wine. After sacrificing the bull, they brought the boy to Eli. Sir, do you remember me? Hannah asked. I am the very woman who stood here years ago praying to the Lord. I asked the Lord to give me this boy, and he has granted my request. Now I am giving him to the Lord, and he will belong to the Lord his whole life. And they worshiped the Lord there. So this is one of those areas where there's a lot of different directions. There's a lot to be said. I'm sure we're going to jump into a whole lot of different things. However, every single solitary beautiful thing that could be found in really this entire book, but in as we are going through, is distracted from if we try to take any of this, modernize it, or say that the Lord is condoning this, that, or the other, and try to rob it of its context, time, place, situation, the whole 9 yards. There's a lot of this, and like, yes, we say this quite often as we're going through the Old Testament, but this chapter is kind of like a super concentrated dose of different time, different place, situation, circumstance, the whole 9 yards. And so I think before we get any further, it just bears mentioning that, remember, we got to keep it in context and start from that place as we start to unpack this. So Andrew, since you're back with us this week, I'll go ahead and kick it to you to take it from there as I let my cat out, because I'm sure you all can hear him.
I can't actually.
I can't.
But
I can't.
apparently your cat's using the mic you were using when you got on that we couldn't hear you with. No, so like this chapter specifically is one that I mean, like you said, there's a lot of cultural things we got to take into consideration or anything like that. But at the same time, there's a lot of things from this chapter that, if nothing else, we as leaders in the church should be taking notice of. One of them is the fact that the mocking of Hannah because she was barren. That's not something that is just, it's a cultural thing. That's something that we still have going on within our churches right now. And the recognizing that is something we need to do a better job of, is recognizing the fact that the way we talk about family and children and motherhood and all that stuff as a church, we need to be more sensitive to those in our congregation that may be like Hannah, that have been praying fervently and have the faith and everything like that,
Mm-hmm.
but it's still not happening. It's there. And we got to make sure we also don't do what Elijah did and just assume that somebody that is in deep, heartfelt prayer and crying and praying so fervently that they are not able to talk, that they're just crazy or putting on a show or drunk or whatever it is. But that, we need to be more sensitive as church leadership to these kind of things. That's just one of those things. The other stuff with it, though, I think I love this story in general because the contrast in the faith of Hannah compared to everybody else that is mentioned is just so drastic that it can't be ignored. I mean, we don't get it here, but we're going to get it here soon. The difference in even the priests compared to Hannah is so drastic that it's amazing how this woman that seemed to be, she was loved by her husband, but nobody else really cared about her, and she was made fun of all the time. But she was faithful, and her faith is what actually made her be noticed more than anything else in the end. It's just that part of the story always is huge for me in terms of just the image that we get of how strong her faith was in a time like we talked about last week with Ruth towards the end of the Judges, where faith was just kind of there. It wasn't a major piece of the cultural puzzle anymore. We've got another woman right after we finish with Ruth. We have another woman who is marked by her faith and belief in that Yahweh is still the God of the land, contrasted with men in the picture who are not living that way.
What do you got in?
Can you guys hear me? My sound
Yeah.
was looking weird. Okay, cool. Yeah, I like the way you were going, and I was kind of just reading back over it as you were talking, and it does stand out that Hannah, in a cultural setting where it is very patriarchal, she is not the favorite here, still acts with virtue, still acts in faith, still trusts God. I think those are the things that we should be, really gleaning from this, is that even in the circumstance that she's in, she still honors God. She still, focuses on God. And because of this culture, the Jewish culture, they were, their women, their value was in bringing in a child, right? Because the Messiah was supposed to be coming through one of the women, right? And so that was kind of their belief. And so to be barren, yeah, that was like the worst thing in the world, because, how can you contribute, if you're not, bringing forth a child? And so this is interesting because, again, and I like how Joe started off, different time, different place, different setting. um it's a different cultural, context. In some of these things, you're looking at like, whoa, it actually says, uh, uh I think I was on a stream where we were talking about the multiple wives thing, and how, well, the Bible, you know says you can have multiple wives. The Bible records people having multiple wives, but the Bible is not teaching, and so again, read the story, rest in the story. Don't try to, like, rob from the story things that support whatever you want them to support, or, because then you're missing the point of the story. The point of this story is Hannah's, faithfulness, and how she's going to be connected to this entire lineage that's going to bring forth, Jesus, and uh, specifically in this one, to bring forth Samuel, who's going to be the prophet that goes to David. It's also going to connect to Jesus. So even her, she's a part of this entire story. And if you narrow in too close, you're going to miss the big picture, And so you look at chapter 1, and you see Hannah's prayer, you see Hannah's vow. So the vow stood out to me, because when she vows that, if you bless me, I'm going to give this back, right? Give this back to the Lord. I'm going to give him back to the Lord. How many people go to God and want something from God, and they want it to the point where, well, I'm not going to keep it for myself. This is for the Lord. This is not for me. That is amazing. And then, of course, Eli, seeing her praying and thinking that she's drunk, because she's praying in such a way, it's so passionate. It's just unusual for him to see this happening. So yeah, this chapter 1 opens up pretty hot and heavy, with a lot of, if we were watching a movie, we would be, there's a lot of drama, a lot of drama going on there.
Well, and I want to just add one other thing, because Joe, I had told you yesterday in the chat that there's a little bit of a personal story behind this chapter, and what you just hit there, Ant, is related to it. Because I, for those that don't know, I'm epileptic. My family, we never knew I was epileptic until college, but the first seizure I had was at 11 months. I was unconscious for like 8 hours, something like that. I'm the only medical case that they found of an infant having this kind of thing going on. And my mom specifically recalls the fact that while they're in the ER waiting to hear what's going on to try and get answers, she has this prayer from Hannah that's the same type of thing of, if you give our son back, we will give him back to you.
Wow.
And just and it's one of those things where it's hard. We got to be careful with it, because we don't want it to be a name it claim it type of thing.
Right.
It's not a prosperity gospel type of thing, but there's something about the faith of parents when it's praying for the children, saying that we just want to be with them, but we know they are yours. And if you can just let us have a little bit more time, whatever you're going to do, we are going to let it happen. It is something that it's not talked about a lot. I know I've had conversations with a couple of people about the fact that the prayers of a grandmother, for whatever reason, a grandma's prayers seem to be heard a lot clearer than other people, for whatever reason that is. It's just something about that kind of bond between mom and kid, grandma and kid, that pulls the level of faith that is involved with that relationship always seems to have a little bit more impact than we typically notice. But especially a parent that's willing to say, we are going, whatever you are going to do with our child, we want to help get it there, is something that is, it's more, it seems like it's a very simple prayer in desperation, but at the same time, it's like we were talking about, it shows, it contrasts a level of faith that we see in Hannah that is a little bit different than what we typically talk about when we talk about praying and faith and things like that.
Yeah. This is y'all are hitting on things that are at the core of why I get labeled so many different things. and why nobody really knows what to do with me, because I am a weird blend of, depending on who you ask, hyper spiritual and incredibly skeptical. Um, and it's interesting because on one side of it, we have, if we are going to take seriously the deep notes of the Christian faith, then we have to take seriously the supernatural notes of it. We have to take seriously the fact that prayers get answered, that all of these things, right? Like supernatural, crazy, wild and out things happen on a regular basis. So we cannot go so far down the rabbit hole as to say it's all bunk, it's all nonsense, it's all this, it's all that. However, I'm going to go ahead and pull out a an object lesson that gets used a whole lot because it makes sense here. You go out and you buy a white minivan. You buy that white minivan, you own that white minivan. Suddenly you look around and see a whole bunch of white minivans around. I'm just saying, like, we can very easily see connections to things because of situations and circumstances that aren't necessarily there. So I'm just gonna say, be careful. Like Andrew said, be careful. I'm not sure I would necessarily label it, name it, and claim it personally. I see what you're doing there, but I think that there is a propping up that can happen when we start to talk about um praying in desperate times, praying in desperate moments, and things like that. And I think sometimes when we think too hard about that, it can result in this idea that we come to God expectantly that it's always going to come out aces, because I I prayed earnestly. I prayed deeply. All of those kinds of things. I'm not saying that that's what anybody's saying on the stream. I'm just saying that we have to be careful when processing these things and modernizing these things and taking these things too far down any particular trail, because we can get ourselves real messed up real easy. That being said, I 1000% to anybody who's been tracking with KFM, with any of the shows, any of the live streams, any of this, I have not been quiet about my story, and so there is a certain level of the only word that's coming to my mind is cynicism, and I don't necessarily mean cynicism, but it's just a different perspective when
Well,
talking about these kinds of things. So
and
so for
there's
me,
another part of the story here. We don't know that this is the first time that she ever did this. She may have done this over and over and over again with no result. Like, we only have the recording of the fact that she had this prayer with a good result. It may be that this was years and years and years. This was the normal practice, because the normal practice was that they went to Jerusalem. The normal, or not Jerusalem, to the temple. The normal practice was that she got made fun of. The normal practice was all this stuff. It may not have been I prayed in desperation one time and God answered it. This could have been something that was a regular occurrence over and over and over that we just don't have record of. So we can't even use this story to say, "Oh, look, one time if I pray in desperation one time, God's going to answer it." We don't see that in the story. We don't know that that's what's happening.
Yeah, I
I
think,
I
but I think that goes to what Joe was saying earlier. Sorry about that. I didn't mean to cut you off. What
no,
Joe
but
was saying earlier is that as we're reading this, putting things in priority, Hannah's getting this prayer answered is not the focus of the passage. The focus of the
Mm-mm.
passage is how Samuel came to be.
Yeah,
Hannah's prayer is secondary, to the main point. And I agree with you, Andrew, that she may have prayed this prayer hundreds of times before this moment. But the reason why this is recorded is because it's talking about the birth of Samuel and how he came,
yeah.
to be.
Yeah, and that's my point. And I would just the only and I wouldn't even call it necessarily pushing back. The only asterisk that I would put on what you said, Andrew, as far as this could have been the 100th time, this could have been the 1,000th time, whatever. We don't know. Is that it doesn't matter. It's not. It doesn't. We need to make sure that we aren't focusing on the prayer being answered as the focal point of the conversation, because if we do, that's where it gets lost. And and it's just one of those things. The further I get down the road of walking with people in deep spiritual notes and trying to help them understand the reality of relational context for our faith, all of those kinds of things inevitably, uh, I'll say 9 times out of 10, because I can't speak for every single situation in every single circumstance, but by a stunning majority, I come across people that prayed something with all their heart and it didn't work out. And and this is where we need to make sure that we aren't modernizing these things and taking these things too far down the rabbit hole, because we can very easily, without even meaning to, without having any intention of anything maniacal or mustache twirling or anything else like that, lead people into very serious heartache, very serious issues that turn them away from God as a whole, because we point to stories like this and say, look at the faithfulness of God. And that's not wrong, but that's also has to be handled with a level of nuance that speaks to the context and the whole picture, that this isn't a story of, hey, look at the importance of kids, hey, look at the importance of parenthood, hey, look at the importance of praying without ceasing, hey, look at the importance of praying earnestly, hey, look at this, because we're going to lose the rabbit. We're going to lose the rabbit. It's to Ant's point, that's not what this story is about. This story is not about the earnest prayers of a parent. This is not about the earnest dedication of a parent. This is about the origin of a person who is a part of the bigger story. That is the main point. If there's other points, like to Andrew's point, because I this is how this goes, right? Andrew's on and I bust his chops for like an hour and a half. That's how this works. Um and but I want to give him flowers. He raised a very good point. When you start to extrapolate out that importance of parenthood, and you start to take, hey, look at the Bible says how important it is to be a parent, and you almost subconsciously grab the idea from scripture that, hey, look, it was already set up in scripture that it's okay to ostracize somebody for not having kids, that like the standard had been set by the scriptures, and thus we even subconsciously, because I don't think it's always as simple as somebody sees this and says, oh, okay, cool, now I can go do this. I think it's a subliminal thing when we take the wrong ideas from this, and then suddenly folks get left out in the cold. Like a I literally just had a conversation with a church who had asked me to help them with some ministry stuff and all of this sort of stuff, and we were planning this whole ministry hitting this whole group of people that didn't have anything to do with parents or kids or anything else like that, and the entire thing got scrapped so that way they could launch a kids ministry. And when we take stuff like this so far as to say the only value that you have is if you are a parent, then we seriously get this twisted. And so, yes, to go back to the cynicism portion of it, I hyper vigilant maybe to the idea that we are we are we just have to be very careful. Any context that we take out of this that isn't the story, talking about the power of somebody else's prayer, the power of parents, the power of this, the power of that, we just have to be careful because we're playing on thin ice. And if anybody disputes me that that's not naturally thin ice, look around. Like, seriously, open your eyes and look at the world around you because this is real. As the dude here that does not fit the bill for the standard parent and all of that, I am a dad, but it's a whole other thing. Just we just got to be careful. That's all. And yes, Lingo, my Ringo, we are live. You are not watching a rerun. So, now that we have thoroughly now that the horse is begging for mercy, let's go ahead and shift gears here if unless somebody else has somebody else or has something else to add. I have a feeling that once Andrew's back with us, he's going to be out on a boat. All right,
Right.
let's go ahead and jump back in. 1 Samuel chapter 2. Then Hannah prayed, "My heart rejoices in the Lord. The Lord has made me strong. Now I have an answer for my enemies. I rejoice because you rescued me. No one is holy like the Lord. There is no one besides you. There is no rock like our God. Stop acting so proud and haughty. Don't speak with such arrogance, for the Lord is a God who knows what you have done. He will judge your actions. The bow of the mighty is now broken, and those who stumbled are now strong. Those who were well fed are now starving, and those who were starving are now full. The childless woman now has 7 children, and the woman with many children wastes away. The Lord gives both death and life. He brings some down to the grave, but raises others up. The Lord makes some poor and others rich. He brings some down and lifts others up. He lifts the poor from the dust and the needy from the garbage dump. He sets them among princes, placing them in seats of honor. For all the earth is the Lord's, and he has set the world in order. He will protect his faithful ones, but the wicked will despair in darkness. No one will succeed by strength alone. Those who fight against the Lord will be shattered. He thunders against them from heaven. The Lord judges throughout the earth. He gives power to his king. He increases the strength of his anointed one. Then Elkanah returned home to Ramah without Samuel, and the boy served the Lord by assisting Eli the priest. Now, the sons of Eli were scoundrels who had no respect for the Lord or for their duties as priests. Whenever anyone offered a sacrifice, Eli's sons would send over a servant with a 3-pronged fork. While the meat of the sacrificed animal was still boiling, the servant would stick the fork into the pot and demand that whatever it brought up be given to Eli's sons. All the Israelites who came to worship at Shiloh were treated this way. Sometimes the servant would come even before the animal's fat had been burned on the altar. He would demand raw meat before it had been boiled so that it could be used for roasting. The man offering the sacrifice might reply, "Take as much as you want, but the fat must be burned first." Then the servant would demand, "No, give it to me now, or I'll take it by force." So the sin of these young men was very serious in the Lord's sight, for they treated the Lord's offerings with contempt. But Samuel, though he was only a boy, served the Lord. He wore a linen garment like that of a priest. Each year, his mother made a small coat for him and brought it to him when she came with her husband for the sacrifice. Before they returned home, Eli would bless Elkanah and his wife and say, "May the Lord give you other children to take the place of this one she gave to the Lord." And the Lord blessed Hannah, and she conceived and gave birth to 3 sons and 2 daughters. Meanwhile, Samuel grew up in the presence of the Lord. Now, Eli was very old, but he was aware of what his sons were doing to the people of Israel. He knew, for instance, that his sons were seducing the young women who assisted at the entrance of the tabernacle. Eli said to them, "I have been hearing reports from all the people about the wicked things you are doing. Why do you keep sinning? You must stop, my sons. The reports I hear among the Lord's people are not good. If someone sins against another person, God can mediate for the guilty party. But if someone sins against the Lord, who can intercede?" But Eli's sons wouldn't listen to their father, for the Lord was already planning to put them to death. Meanwhile, the boy Samuel grew taller, and grew in favor with the Lord and with people. One day, a man of God came to Eli and gave him this message from the Lord: "I revealed myself to your ancestors when they were Pharaoh's slaves in Egypt. I chose your ancestor Aaron from among all the tribes of Israel to be my priest, to offer sacrifices on my altar, to burn incense, and to wear the priestly vest, as he served me. And I assigned the sacrificial offerings to your priests. So why do you scorn my sacrifices and offerings? Why do you give your sons more honor than you give me? For you they have become fat from the best offerings of my people Israel. Therefore, the Lord, the God of Israel, says, I promised that your branch of the tribe of Levi would always be my priests, but I will honor those who honor me, and I will despise those who think lightly of me. The time is coming when I will put an end to your family, so it will no longer serve as my priests. All the members of your family will die before their time. None will reach old age. You will watch with envy as I pour out prosperity on the people of Israel. But no members of your family will ever live out their days. The few not cut off from serving at my altar will survive, but only so their eyes can go blind and their hearts break, and their children will die a violent death. And to prove that I have said what I have said will come true, I will cause your 2 sons, Hophni and Phinehas, to die on the same day. Then I will raise up a faithful priest who will serve me and do what I desire. I will establish his family, and they will be priests to my anointed kings forever. Then all of your surviving family will bow before him, begging for money and food. Please, they will say, give us jobs among the priests so we will have enough to eat. Well, there you go. Um, yeah. So it's this takes a bit of a turn here, right? Because we're talking about these, the origin of Samuel, and then we're talking about the setting for what the situation looks like at that point in time. So, and where do we go from here?
Well, like you said, we wanna stick in and rest in the story. This is again, just like Ruth, this is rich with um Torah, Levitical law, from what we're seeing, and how the sons of Eli, receiving the sacrifices according to the law of Moses. All these things are not random, right? They're not just, oh, we're just going to do these sacrifices. No, they're following the law of Moses, and you find that these young men are starting to get kind of loose with, how they're handling the sacrifices, and they're kind of getting a little bit, entitled, and then they, start disrespecting women and things around the temple. And all the while there's this young man, Samuel, who's growing and learning and developing right in front of your eyes, while these sons. And so you have Samuel. Oh, he is on a boat. we have
Yep.
Samuel we have Samuel who's coming up, and Eli's sons are actually falling off. So it's almost like Samuel's getting ready to take, a more prominent role, and Eli's sons are getting ready to fall off. And you're seeing them, happen at the same time. So that's, as we're reading through this, it's like, again, more drama. Man, the Old Testament, man, boy, this would be a great show to watch.
What do you got, Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, this was part of what I was alluding to back in chapter one. This is like a stark contrast between, the what we're introduced to with Hannah and Samuel, and then we get to the priest and his kids, and like just the difference in their respect towards God, their understanding of who God is, their understanding of what their role is with God. All of it is just, there's such a stark contrast between the two. It's I mean, there's no way to avoid it. I mean, that's literally what the story is that there's this huge contrast, and not only do we notice, but obviously God notices, and God makes it clear that Eli should have noticed, and that since he didn't, it's time to move on. And we're about to get into the meat of the actual like story and narrative of the book itself.
Yeah, and I would be remiss not to say that where we went at length at talking about what not to focus on in chapter one. As we start to play this out, it becomes very easy to get hung up on or focus on the wrath and judgment of God. And it's stuff like this as to where, Old Testament God versus New Testament Jesus comes. This idea
Yeah,
that, God used to be way more hardcore, way angrier, all of this stuff in the Old Testament, because we're when we do that, we look at the Old Testament through a pseudo Christ filter. And I say pseudo because it's not really looking at it just like that. It's looking at it through the sense of a malformed adaptation of Christ to say, "Oh, but God should be this way. This is how we think that God should be, because this is how we think Christ is," sort of thing. And so, like, it's just kind of layers of malformed theology on top of each
yeah,
other that lead us to this idea of, "Oh, look at the angry God. Look at the wrathful God. Look at the," like, yes, there within every mess of nonsense, there tends to be some nugget somewhere that got extrapolated out on. So don't hear what I'm not saying. Yes, God's wrath is a thing. Yes, God's judgment is a thing. But when we become so hyper focused there that it's just like we talked about there. When you fixate on one dimension of it and build an entire story, an entire theology off of one aspect and one dimension of it, you lose parts of the bigger picture that are happening. And so
yeah,
this is just one of those areas where I watch people start to go off the rail of, "Oh, look at the angry God. He's gonna slaughter everybody. He's gonna kill an entire family. He's killing innocent people because somebody screwed up," and all of those kinds of things. Because again, we're reading something that isn't actually there. We're adding our own definitions to the language that's being used in the story.
Yeah, I think one thing that, another perspective that could be overlooked is that this chapter or this part of the story actually breaks some rules that I think we have for people. Eli is going to be teaching Samuel how to follow and know the voice of the Lord, while he's got sons that don't
Yeah.
follow and know the voice of the Lord. I mean, it's almost like most people would say, well, how can he teach anybody anything when his sons are acting this way? Right? I mean, that's kind of the common thought process, but we see that it kind of breaks that rule here. That Eli is actually going to be a great help to Samuel where he could not help his sons, and so it's just an interesting paradox, I guess that would be, if that's the word I want to use. But yeah, it's an interesting dilemma there, that he's going to be such an important part of Samuel becoming who he is, but yet his sons are corrupt and he don't know what to do with them.
And that's I think that's interesting, and I think and I really dig the way that you laid that out, because it doesn't overemphasize any of the points that shouldn't be overemphasized. It just flatly states he is of help to this person, but his sons, who also have free will, are
Have free will.
choosing to go their own direction. And that's
Right.
where it can get very complicated when we start to look at biblical examples of, oh, but a real man of God,
Right.
their
Right.
kids would be in line. But generally, what we mean, the quiet part out loud, that
Mm,
we mean is a real man of God would keep their kids in line,
in
sort of
line.
thing.
Right.
Like,
Right.
Yeah.
but but again, nuance. Like, if today's word of the day is nuance,
Nuance.
approach this with nuance. If you can look at the
Yeah.
nuance of all of it, then you can get to what Ant is saying, where yeah, like that's the situation. You laid it out. Like, yes, that's what we are going to watch play out in the grand scheme of all of this. We don't need, like, but like, keep going, like keep walking, keep going, you know what I mean? In Andrew's case, keep rowing.
Keep rowing.
uh
Paddling. Paddling.
Okay,
Paddling, there we
paddle.
go. um I'm not well versed enough in boat culture, apparently.
Yeah.
um but keep going, and you'll actually be able to see how the story plays out. Like Andrew said, this is how we're getting to this is how, like we're getting to the point where the actual, like, this is just setting, this is just trimming, this is just context. We haven't actually gotten
Right.
into what the storyline really is, of what, where we're heading and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll say about that is, for that parent, like and I love what you said, Joe. For that parent out there that says, I'm a failure because my children who are adult are choosing to live a way that doesn't reflect what I believe I taught them and all this kind of stuff. And that's not on you. They have free, you said
Yeah.
it, they have free will. They're choosing
Yeah.
their life. But look at Samuel, who's a young man who, listening to Eli, is going to grow and learn from the same guy whose children chose to do something different. And so, parents out there that say, man, I blew it. My children are living away. And that's not always on you. People have free will and they make their decisions. That doesn't mean that you can no longer help anybody because maybe I didn't get through to my own children.
Yeah, that's good. All right, let's go ahead and jump into chapter 3. Meanwhile, the boy Samuel served the Lord by assisting Eli. Now, in those days, Messages from the Lord were very rare, and visions were quite uncommon. Eli, who was almost blind by now, had gone to bed. The lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was sleeping in the tabernacle near the ark of God. Suddenly, the Lord called out, Samuel. Yes. Samuel replied, What is it? He got up and ran to Eli. Here I am. Did you call me? I didn't call you, Eli replied. Go back to bed. So he did. Then the Lord called out again, Samuel. Again, Samuel got up and went to Eli. Here I am. Did you call me? I didn't call you, my son. Eli said, Go back to bed. Samuel did not yet know the Lord because he had never had a message from the Lord before. So the Lord called a third time, and once more Samuel got up and went to Eli. Here I am. Did you call me? Then Eli realized it was the Lord who was calling the boy. So he said to Samuel, Go and lie down again. And if someone calls you again, say, Speak, Lord, your servant is listening. So Samuel went back to bed. And the Lord came and called as before, Samuel, Samuel. And Samuel replied, Speak, your servant is listening. Then the Lord said to Samuel, I am about to do a shocking thing in Israel. I am going to carry out all my threats against Eli and his family from beginning to end. I have warned him that judgment is coming upon his family forever because his sons are blaspheming God and he hasn't disciplined them. So I have vowed that the sins of Eli and his sons will never be forgiven by sacrifices or offerings. Samuel stayed in bed until morning. Then got up and opened the doors of the tabernacle as usual. He was afraid to tell Eli what the Lord had said to him. But Eli called out to him, Samuel, my son. Here I am. Samuel replied, What did the Lord say to you? Tell me everything, and may God strike you and even kill you if you hide anything from me. So Samuel told Eli everything. He didn't hold anything back. It is the Lord's will, Eli replied. Let him do what he thinks is best. As Samuel grew up, the Lord was with him, and everything Samuel said proved to be reliable. And all Israel, from Dan in the to Beersheba in the south, knew that Samuel was confirmed as a prophet of the Lord. The Lord continued to appear at Shiloh and gave messages to Samuel there at the tabernacle. I think it's interesting. Um, it's I think sometimes we get this picture of the burning bush. We get this the big bombastic. Oh, it's God. It's God talking. How could you possibly miss that? Like how could you possibly mistake God saying something for anything else? But like multiple times. And like, oh no, I didn't call you. Nope, I didn't call you. Nope. Oh, wait a minute. You know what I mean? Like, I just think it's interesting, and to a lesser degree, less dramatic, less, bombastic and all of that sort of stuff. I just think this falls into that category of, oh, this is stuff that, like, oh, they were so dedicated to God that they knew the second that these things happened, that it was God talking, and all of this sort of stuff. It very easily could have become that. Like when you look at the history of the stories, as you look at the history of how these were preserved and cataloged and all of that sort of stuff, and how many opportunities there were for little nuances like that to get completely overhauled, to make the characters involved look as best as absolutely possible, and to see that they weren't, is just, like I said, just interesting. It adds to the humanity and the realism of the of the story. We've got a comment here from Marcus. Good morning. Says teach. Absolutely. Glad you are with us this morning. All right, Andrew, I'll throw it to you. What do you got?
I mean, it's just another. It's interesting again. We're still in that little bit of where we're dealing with the contrast between the two as we're setting everything up. Because I mean, again, we're at the priest, who was supposed to have been hearing from God and recognizing God's voice, doesn't doesn't think anything of it right away, doesn't respond. And based off of even what God tells Samuel, he it sounds like there was a shot for Eli to be able to correct all the stuff that God had told him in chapter 2, if he would have actually, gotten down and done the work. But now it's too late because he did not act. And so, you got this contrast again of Samuel, who recognizes it. Ooh, I got something. Hang on. Um, Samuel recognizes it, but doesn't know what it is, but is willing to learn, willing to know, wanting to know what's going on. He's seeking out. Oh my goodness, this is big. Seeking out whatever it is that Elijah has for him, because he thinks it's Elijah that's calling him. He's ready to serve,
Yeah.
and it's the heart posture that we get from Samuel all the way through here as a kid is, and in a lot of ways it's the same heart that we saw with his mom at the beginning, and it carried through of this. His desire is to do what God has called him to do. My goodness, this thing is, oh, it broke my line. It broke my line.
Right.
But yeah, this desire to serve is what stands out the most. Is just that, he's ready. He doesn't even know what it means. He doesn't understand what any of it is. He was just dropped off at the temple as a boy, but yet
Yeah.
he's ready to serve and wants to do what's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man,
You know, did he say something? Okay.
no, you're
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, yeah, I like the, as we were talking about before, the transition point here. So as Eli's sons are, kind of blowing it, right? Samuel is just learning it,
Yeah,
and the Bible was clear that this was, not very prominent in this time. It was actually rare to have visions and dreams and hear a word from the Lord at this particular time. Um, and so Samuel has no idea of this call and who's calling him. But Eli, of all people, it takes him a minute, but he says, hey, the next time you hear this, here's how you respond. And Samuel begins to respond. And guess what he gets from the Lord? He gets a word of correction or judgment against Eli and his sons. And Eli's
hmm
like, look, don't hold back. Tell me the truth. I felt like that was admirable because
Yeah.
for him to say, you know what, tell me everything, because he probably already knew that things were not the way they should be. And if this young man is hearing from the Lord, I don't want to run from it. You know, I'm gonna take my medicine like a man. I hate to say it like that, but I'm gonna take this medicine. Speak. Tell me what it is that the Lord says, and He says specifically because he didn't discipline his sons. You know, this is where you don't want to go too far. Is that
yeah,
him disciplining his sons was not going to change them, but it was going to allow people to see that he's not approving of these actions. It almost seemed like he was passive, like he didn't
yeah,
say anything to them, like he never said a word to his sons as they were doing these things, even though he knew it was wrong. But again, the main point is this transition of the priest, transitioning out, and now the emergence of a true prophet, which this was, again, something new in this time. They hadn't had a prophet like this since Moses. So this is brand new. And I think if we stick with the story, we stick with the narrative, we started in Genesis, we've been walking through this thing. And if we can hold on to the context of what's happening, we're seeing an incredible shift that is happening in Israel at this time with the emergence of Samuel as a prophet. His role is going to become huge, as he steps up here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also worth noting that as we talk about not reading too much or going too far, part of why there was such harsh judgment for Eli is because of his role as priest. Like he had a
Right.
much higher standard he was supposed to meet, and especially because of the fact that priesthood was supposed to be a family thing. This was their inheritance, is what it says. His son should have recognized that also. And so the fact that the whole family was denying their inheritance, that was the issue, much more than just he was a horrible father. It was he denied the inheritance. And so because he denied the inheritance, there was punishment for it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an important distinction, because I think if we allow ourselves, this can rest on the level of a commentary on his on how good or bad of a job he was doing as a parent, when in all actuality what we're seeing more so here is um almost like an apathetic tone to the role that he's called to. And it's an
Yeah.
interesting juxtaposition between Eli and Samuel, where one is like almost lackadaisical. You know what I mean? Like, I'm gonna tell you, but like hold out your hand so that way I can slap your wrist. You know what I mean? Sort of thing. Whereas Samuel's like, yeah, no, this is my role. Like, this is what I am, this is what I am here to do, and thus I am going to do it. And I call it apathy because, like you said, Ant, there is this air of, all right, I earned this. Let me take my licks. Let me do, like I have this coming. But he doesn't change. Like,
Right.
nothing
Yeah.
changes. He just understands what has happened, and he's like, and it's almost like he's given up. You know what I mean? Like, again, like we say, there's room in every conversation that we have around the Old Testament and all of that. That there's a level where you can comfortably kick the can around, and that's okay. Just recognize when you're saying things that aren't like, "Eh," and he gave up on his role. Like, he doesn't say that in the scriptures. You know
Right.
what I mean? I'm speaking to the tone that's present and positing something rather than saying chapter and verse says this.
Yeah. Well, and it's not the last time we're gonna see it either throughout the
No.
scriptures. I mean that's the whole thing we have with Hezekiah. Hezekiah just is like, okay, whatever, at least I'm good, and just gives up. He literally just gives up on the idea of, well, maybe we can right this ship. And it was the same sort of thing. Because of that, God then moves on to the next person. It's like, all right, well, if you don't want the role anymore, then I will find somebody that does.
Yep. Yep. It's like so for those that don't know, I did a book study on Esther, and in one of the episodes Andrew was on the episode, and a big part of what we talked about throughout the entirety of that episode is that we see a we see a pattern that exists in scripture where God will put something on somebody's heart. But if that person doesn't stand and respond, he is willing to put that thing on somebody else's heart.
Hmm.
That a person has the ability to respond
Or not.
either way. They have the ability to respond and say and reject it, but they also have the ability to accept it. And so we have to get out of the mindset of cosmic chess pieces being moved across the board versus, like, this is what we are seeing God act in a way that historically we have seen repeatedly, and thus humans have that same level of agency that they always have. All right, let's go ahead and jump back into the text. We are picking up with chapter 4. And Samuel's words went out to all the people of Israel. At that time, Israel was at war with the Philistines. The Israelite army was camped near Ebenezer, and the Philistines were at Aphek. The Philistines attacked and defeated the army of Israel, killing 4,000 men. After the after the battle was over, the troops retreated to their camp, and the elders of Israel asked, "Why did the Lord allow us to be defeated by the Philistines?" Then they said, "Let's bring the ark of the covenant of the Lord from Shiloh. If we carry it into battle with us, it will save us from our enemies." So they sent men to Shiloh to bring the ark of the covenant of the Lord of heaven's armies, who is enthroned between the cherubim. Hophni and Phinehas, the sons of Eli, were also there with the ark of the covenant of God. When all the Israelites saw the ark of the covenant of the Lord coming into the camp, their shout of joy was so loud it made the ground shake. "What's going on?" the Philistines asked. "What's all the shouting about in the Hebrew camp?" When they were told it was because the ark of the Lord had arrived, they panicked. "The gods have come into their camp," they cried. "This is a disaster. We have never had to face anything like this before. Help! Who can save us from these mighty gods of Israel? They are the same gods who destroyed the Egyptians with the plagues when when Israel was in the wilderness. Fight as never before, Philistines. If you don't, we will become the Hebrews' slaves, just as they have been ours. Stand up like men and fight." So the Philistines fought desperately, and Israel was defeated again. The slaughter was great. 30,000 Israelite soldiers died that day. The survivors turned and fled to their tents. The ark of the Lord was captured, and Hophni and Phinehas, the two sons of Eli, were killed. A man from the tribe of Benjamin ran from the battlefield and arrived at Shiloh later that same day. He had torn his clothes and put dust on his head to show his grief. Eli was waiting beside the road to hear the news of the battle, for his heart trembled from the safety of for the safety of the ark of God. When the messenger arrived and told what had happened, an outcry resounded throughout the town. "What is all the noise about?" Eli asked. The messenger rushed over to Eli, who was 98 years old and blind. He said to Eli, "I have just come from the battlefield. I was there this very day." "What happened, my son?" Eli demanded. "Israel has been defeated by the Philistines." The messenger replied, "The people have been slaughtered, and your two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, were also killed, and the ark of God has been captured." When the messenger mentioned what had happened to the ark of God, Eli fell backward from his seat beside the gate. He broke his neck and died, for he was old and overweight. He had been Israel's judge for 40 years. Eli's daughter in law, the wife of Phinehas, was pregnant and near her time of delivery. When she heard that the ark of God had been captured and her father in law and husband were dead, she went into labor and gave birth. She died in childbirth. Before she passed away, the midwives tried to encourage her. "Don't be afraid," they said. "You have a baby boy." But she did not answer or pay attention to them. She named the child Ichabod, which means "Where is the glory?" For she said, "Israel's glory is gone." She named him this because the ark of God had been captured and because her father-in-law and husband were dead. Then she said, "The glory has departed from Israel, for the ark of God has been captured." Yeah, this story continues to be dramatic, you know? Um, but yeah, so and it happened just as was said was going to happen, with Eli's whole family going and all of that. It's interesting. This part of scripture gets weird when you're looking at the timeline, because there's like congruent events happening at the same time, and like things are being told in different places but set in a similar or in the same time period as a different book and things like that. So it's kind of like a multi-camera look at the different things that are going on at different points in Israel's history. Ant, what do you got?
Well, I think it's interesting, looking at this, because again, linking it back, with all that we've covered, trying to hold on to the context and keep it consistent with what we've seen, is that this put me in the reminder of Joshua, and when there was sin in the camp, defeat was imminent. There was a need for repentance and going before the Lord, and really really a heart change. And you see the end of the time of Eli and his sons, and the rise of Samuel is getting ready to happen. And it's like, man, this is a time of turmoil. This is a time of struggle and chaos. And so there's definitely a need for a voice to rise up here, because Israel is in a bad way. I mean, the glory is gone. The Ark of the Covenant has been taken. They've been defeated by their arch rivals, the Philistines. And keep your eye on the Philistines, guys. You're going to keep hearing about them. they're going to keep popping up in these stories. So
A recurring character.
the recurring character are the Philistines. And then the importance of the ark. We haven't really heard much about the ark, and here the emergence of the ark, because you're going to start hearing more about the ark going forward. And for those that may have forgotten, the ark is the box that Moses placed important, artifacts and things in, Aaron's rod that budded, those type of things. It has the cherubim on the side with the seat of mercy, and it's the representation of God with them. So for the ark to be taken away, it's almost like they're feeling like, well, man, God is not with us anymore, because that is the kind of the symbol of God being with them. And so this is an interesting time. And as you said, Joe, the drama continues. This thing is still, and it's getting deeper and deeper, and it's not going to like settle down for a little while here. So hang on to your seats. It's a bumpy ride.
What do you got, Andrew?
I mean, that's about it. We've now entered the main events of the rest of the book. Of the Philistines have shown back up. The Ark of the Covenant has shown back up and then disappeared. And the first thing that the main characters that we heard about that God said you're about to die are dead. And so now Samuel's all that's left. And so now it's just a matter of, okay, now what? Now what? And it's very much. I've always looked at this event kind of as we've talked about how there's the different time periods kind of things that we look at within the Old Testament. This really is the end of the judges. At this point, we're now once Eli dies, we are now into prophets and kings, and so we're now in a whole new era of the Old Testament now that we haven't been in yet. And so the tone of the story changes too. I don't know if it's as noticeable to some people or not, but again, if you just read this as almost as a book or like as a movie script type of thing, the entire tone from this chapter on is completely different than anything that we've read up until this point. I mean, it's completely different than the narratives we got in Genesis and Exodus and in Numbers. It's not the law. It's not it's a completely different style of storytelling than we have in Ruth and in Judges. This is a whole new genre of writing that we've got here.
Yeah.
Did you guys notice the brief introduction of the Benjamite, the man from
Yeah.
Benjamin? And I thought that was
Mm-hmm.
interesting, kind of knowing where we go later on, as you said, the introduction of the prophets and kings, that out of nowhere this Benjamite just shows up in here like it's foreshadowing something. But maybe that's just me, you know.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it reminds us again, though. It's like I said, all of this is very much also of a reminder of everything that we've done before. As far as there are all these different tribes. Trying to work together. There are all these different artifacts and things, and the law is still in place. And I mean, even the fact that Eli is referred to as a judge here, we're calling back like, hey, this is where we're at in the story. Don't forget everything that we've read up to this point. But now things are about to take a shift.
Yep. Yep. All right, let's go ahead and jump back into chapter 5. After the Philistines captured the Ark of God, they took it from the battleground at Ebenezer to the town of Ashdod. They carried the Ark of God into the temple of Dagon and placed it beside an idol of Dagon. But when the citizens of Ashdod went to see it the next morning, Dagon had fallen with his face to the ground in front of the ark of the Lord. So they took Dagon and put him in his place again. But the next morning, the same thing happened. Dagon had fallen face down before the ark of the Lord again. This time, his head and hands were broken off and were lying in the doorway. Only the trunk of his body was left intact. That is why, to this day, neither the priests of Dagon nor anyone who enters the temple of Dagon in Ashdod will step on its threshold. Then the Lord's heavy hand struck the people of Ashdod and the nearby villages with a plague of tumors. When the people realized what was happening, they cried out, "We can't keep the ark of God of Israel here any longer. He is against us. We will all be destroyed along with Dagon, our God." So they called together the rulers of the Philistine towns and asked, "What should we do with the ark of the God of Israel?" The rulers discussed it and replied, "Move it to the town of Gath." So they moved the ark of the God of Israel to Gath. But when the ark arrived at Gath, the Lord's heavy hand fell on its men, young and old. He struck them with a plague of tumors, and there was a great panic. So they sent the ark of God to the town of Ekron. But when the people of Ekron saw it coming, they cried out, "They are bringing the ark of the God of Israel here to kill us too." The people summoned the Philistine rulers again and begged them, "Please send the ark of the God of Israel back to its own country, or it will kill us all." For the deadly plague from God had already begun, and great fear was sweeping across the town. Those who didn't die were afflicted with tumors, and the cry from the town rose to heaven. Yeah, so like this thing goes like you said, Amp. We haven't really heard of the arc in a while, but now like it's back in stunning display. You know what I mean? Like and it has been taken, and now everybody who has taken it and everybody who receives it is now paying the price.
Yeah, this
Um,
is the
you guys
the
have anything
clearest.
for this one? Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say this is probably the clearest example that I normally go to of the idea of that God does not need us to defend Him. Like
Yeah.
he's everybody in Israel is mourning and like, whoa, what are we gonna do? All hope is lost. The glory of the Lord is gone, and God's over there just like, I can handle this. Like, this is nothing. Like, what's the puny little rock gonna do? It's gonna bow down. Like that's what the puny little rock's gonna do, is it's gonna bow down. And it's very much of a, I don't need defended. Like, I can handle this part. I just need you to do your part and do what I've called you to do and asked you to do, which is what got them in this situation in the first place. Was they didn't.
Yeah, this one's, like you said, is kind of straightforward. The Philistines having the ark ends up being a bad idea. you know, I mean, basically, that's really all you can say. There's some very interesting things that happen here that are, appear very supernatural. And people can go different directions with that. But I think the point of this is the Philistines having the ark wasn't going to stay there. The ark is meant for Israel. The ark is meant to be with the people of Israel. And even the Philistines figure out, like, hey, this doesn't even belong here. We don't even want this, you know? And so they end up like, hey, it's bringing us bad luck, quote unquote. I don't know if you guys are, I grew up watching Harrison Ford and the Raiders of the Lost Ark and the
Mm-hmm.
Temple of Doom and and they would play on a lot of this stuff, in the movies, and they did have a movie with the Ark of the Covenant, and they're trying to take the Ark of the Covenant and use it because it has great power and all this kind of stuff. Interesting. I don't know why that came into my mind, but as
Probably because of the scene where somebody's face gets melted off when they open up the Ark of
Yeah.
the Covenant.
they open up the ark, and it just interesting. But on a serious note, yeah, it doesn't belong with them, and eventually they get rid of it because they can't possess the glory of God because they're not God's people.
Right. Right. Yeah, I do think that is an important object lesson to draw out from this, where like, you read through this and there is a contrast where the Philistines have been able to overpower the people, but the God
Right.
has overpowered them. Like, it is a very clear distinction on where they set in the pecking order of everything. So let's go ahead and do one more, and see how they respond to all of this. So, First Samuel chapter 6. The ark of the Lord remained in Philistine territory 7 months in all. Then the Philistines called in their priests and diviners and asked them, "What should we do about the ark of the Lord? Tell us how to return it to its own country." "Send the ark of the God of Israel back with a gift," they were told. "Send a gift offering so the plague will stop. Then if you are healed, you will know it was his hand that caused the plague." "What sort of guilt offering should we send?" they asked. And they were told, "Since the plague has struck both you and your 5 rulers, make 5 golden tumors and 5 gold rats, just like those that have ravaged your land. Make these things to show honor to the God of Israel. Perhaps then he will stop afflicting you, your gods, and your land. Don't be stubborn and rebellious, as Pharaoh and the Egyptians were." By the time God was finished with them, they were eager to let Israel go. "Now build a new cart and find 2 cows that have just given birth to calves. Make sure the cows have never been yoked to a cart. Hitch the cows to the cart, but shut their calves away from them in a pen. Put the ark of the Lord on the cart, and beside it place a chest containing the gold rats and gold tumors you are sending as a gift offering. Then let the cows go wherever they want. If they cross the border of our land and go to Beth Shemesh, we will know it was the Lord who brought this great disaster upon us. If they don't, we will know it was not his hand that caused the plague. It came simply by chance. So these instructions were carried out. 2 cows were hitched to the cart, and their newborn calves were shut up in a pen. Then the ark of the Lord and the chest containing the gold rats and tumors were placed on the cart. And sure enough, without veering off in other directions, the cows went straight along the road toward Beth Shemesh, lowering as they went. The Philistine rulers followed them as far as the border of Beth Shemesh. The people of Beth Shemesh were harvesting wheat in the valley, and when they saw the ark, they were overjoyed. The cart came into the field of a man named Joshua and stopped beside a large rock. So the people brought up the wood of the cart, broke up the wood of the cart for a fire, and killed the cows and sacrificed them to the Lord as a burnt offering. Several men of the tribe of Levi lifted the ark of the Lord and the chest containing the gold and gold tumors from the cart and placed them on the large rock. Many sacrifices and burnt offerings were offered to the Lord that day by the people of Bethshemesh. The 5 Philistine rulers watched all this and then returned to Ekron that same day. The 5 golden tumors sent by the Philistines as a guilt offering to the Lord were gifts from the rulers of Ashdod, Gaza, Ashkelon, Gath, and Ekron. The 5 gold rats represented the 5 Philistine towns and their surrounding villages, which were controlled by the 5 rulers. The large rock at Beth Shemesh, where they set the ark of the Lord, still stands in the field of Joshua as a witness to what happened there. But the Lord killed 70 men from Beth Shemesh because they looked into the ark of the Lord, and the people mourned greatly because of what the Lord had done. Who is able to stand in the presence of the Lord, this holy God? They cried out. Where can we send the ark from here? So they sent messengers to the people of Kiriath Jearim and told them, the Philistines have returned the ark of the Lord. Come here and get it. So yeah, we even have examples of the people of God mishandling the ark and bad things happening. They must have never seen Indiana Jones. I'm just saying.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
so yeah, this becomes so intense that they just return it, and people try to look inside, and they get it too. So yeah, that's but I think that's a good object lesson to where things are at, because you have people who receive the ark and mishandle it. You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting them consulting their priests and diviners, their magic people. I'm like, hey, what should we do? How do we get rid of this? And them
Yeah.
coming up with their it's just interesting their knowledge of guilt offerings and things of that nature, and for them to say, "Here, this is how you should do this." You have 5
Yeah.
kings, so we're gonna take 5, gold tumors, 5 rats, I don't know, or rat, whatever, and we're gonna give this, and if it was the Lord plaguing us, and he accepts this, then the plagues will stop, because we don't wanna be like Egypt, which is which is consistent when we read back. I remember in Joshua when Rahab said, "Hey, we've heard what you guys
Yeah.
did." Later on, there was another place they went like, "Oh, we've heard what the Lord has done." And even
Yeah.
here, we see that there is not just in Israel a record of what God has done for Israel, but the surrounding nations and competing or opposition, know and have heard of the Lord and what he's done, which is interesting in the grand scheme of it. As the story goes forward, you're like, it's interesting that this echoes and people know these stories very well, that it's not just in Israel that these stories are known, but even outside of Israel, those stories were known.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking some of the same, where it is interesting that, like, there's this picture of, using the same language, at least, individual um even if the individual components don't look exactly the same. There is a knowledge base of different types of offerings and things like that that would be used. So it is, I there's a picture here of God meeting people where they're at, in that, like, he's not like, he's created something different, but it's not completely upended what the people would know, to a degree. And so there's different, I it seems like there's a continuity of practice, but done in a different way, done out of a different posture, different things like that, that I think helps us to be able to, like, seeing that helps us to be able to root this in history, not just as some story that oftentimes gets told as if it sits absent from history.
Yeah, like you said, same type of practices. The difference is, who are you sacrificing to? Who, are you honoring? Who is it that you are, revering and reverencing? And because we've talked about this before, one of the commandments is, you shall have no other gods before me, right? Which by default means there's other gods, right? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so I mean, it should follow. And so here we're seeing the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, the Most High God, against the gods of the Philistines, and they say that God is more powerful, and we need to bow down and respect him, even if we don't follow him. We need to respect him anyway, which is interesting in itself. That's interwoven into this story.
And it again, it just struck me also, there's again almost a contrast of the respect that the Philistines have for God, compared to, again, we're back to, again, the priests of God himself, who were like, we're gonna take the fat, we're gonna
Right.
take the best of the offerings, we're gonna do all this stuff. Meanwhile, a foreign nation, a pagan
Right.
nation, is like, oh, we gotta be careful. Like, this could potentially be the end of our people here, and all they have is just a gold box. They don't know the story. They don't know the story. They just know that it's important to the people, and that apparently it's important to their God, and so we probably should put this back where we found it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I like that.
Um, all right. So, I think that's a good pausing point, for today's session. Um, we are going to pick back up next week, going through, continuing on the story. But for now, Ant, you want to go ahead and pray us out?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Father, we thank you for this time. We thank you for this opportunity to go through your word and study it together. I pray, God, that you reveal to us the things that are important, the things that we need to take away, the things that will help us to know you better and understand our relationship and role in your purpose, your plan, and your mission. Lord, I thank you for both of these gentlemen, as they have a love for your word and a love for your people. And I just pray, God, that you would bless anyone who watches this, whether now or later on, to have a hunger and thirst for your word. And so, God, we thank you for this time in Jesus' name. Amen.
And right, y'all. That's it. That's all. That's a wrap. Thank you all for joining us this morning. Remember, if you are watching this on the playback, you can still leave comments and questions and things like that even after the fact. We will be paying attention to them even afterwards. Just a reminder, if you are in need of prayer, you can head on over to kfmbroadcasting.com/prayer. There's a form fill that you can fill out. That form will go to our team, and we will be in prayer for you there. For now, remember two very important things: that you are prayed for and you are loved deeply. All right. Peace, y'all.